No matter how good or bad your prospect pool may be, every single NHL team has that diamond in the rough. And today we're going to be bringing the spotlight to some of those players that might be underrated around the league, some prospects that I think could have pretty great NHL futures that aren't getting the attention they deserve. But now, of course, that begs the question, who is the most underrated prospect for your favorite NHL team? How much of an impact could they make in the future? How good of an NHLer could they be? And why are they getting underrated across the league? Well, make sure you watch till the end for all the prospect talk, and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this all throughout the year, presented by BetUS. Speaking of which, today's sponsor is BetUS, the best place to play throughout this hockey season. You can go through the NHL odds for every single day. You can go through different odds as well for the European leagues. If you're thinking about the prospect landscape as well, right now they have the odds for the NCAA Men's Championship winner. Boston College right now at plus 500. They have played so well to start out this season. You can put just $5 down to win 25. Honestly, I think they're going to be riding high this season. We'll see how far they go, but the NCAA is going to be nuts. If you want to make your own picks, though, and not just the NCAA, but the NHL and every single league, BetUS is the place to be, and use code YouTube150 to get a 150% incentive bonus on your first deposit, 125% incentive bonus on your next two deposits after that. Starting us out with the Anaheim Ducks in alphabetical order, I'm going to go with Austin Bernovic for Anaheim. He was a 6th-round pick, 182nd overall by the Ducks back in this last 2024 draft, but he was an overager draft pick and already seems to be turning out pretty good. You look at the profile, 6'4", 201 pounds, and also what he's been able to do. He was an overager pick, but you can see what he was able to accomplish in the USHL last year, getting 40 goals, 71 points in 61 games. And then this year in his freshman season with St. Cloud, he's a point per game already. In 11 games, has 6 goals, 5 assists for 11 points. The big highlights are the offensive skill set, the way he's able to drive the lanes, find offensive opportunities for not just himself, but his teammates, and the shooting ability is just absolutely pristine. But the skating issue is something that I think will come over him. If he's not able to improve that acceleration, then his chances of being an NHLer are a lot less. But I think there's a lot to work with here, and as a 6th rounder, he's looking pretty good. Next up, we're going to go on to the Boston Bruins and their most underrated prospect. I'm going to go with the Latvian stud, Danis Lakamelis, who is somebody that I think has really improved since his draft year, being drafted in the 4th round in 2022. He was somebody that always had great smarts and a great two-way ability as a centerman, but I think what he's been able to do in the NCAA these last couple of seasons, he's shown some real improvement, especially in the physical game he has. You can see, especially this season, he's almost a point per game with UMass, but in 10 games is 1 goal, 8 assists for 9 points. He's someone that I think is just a very data-driven center. He's somebody that is just good in transition, knows when to support his teammates, and always seems to make the right decisions. And I think he's somebody that with the improving physical game, the improving muscle he has, I think could develop into a very solid and capable bottom 6 centerman. Next up is Buffalo, and we're going to transition on to another European prospect that has had a pretty great transition onto their AHL team in Rochester, and that's Anton Wahlberg. He's somebody that has really developed over the last couple seasons too. He was a 2nd rounder in 2023, and you can tell with the size, 6'3", 194 pounds. He's a big boy, but the skating ability and the skill level, I think, is a pretty big strength for Wahlberg, and it catches a lot of defenders off guard. You can see what he's been able to do the last couple of seasons playing in the SHL. Then this year in the AHL full-time, in 11 games, he has 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points, and as a 19-year-old, that's pretty great. Considering the raw tools that he has, the fact that Wahlberg has already been able to produce in North America, watch out for this guy. Now we go to the Calgary Flames, who had quite a few good options. Twin Moran was somebody that I debated having in this spot, but I wanted to give Jacob Battaglia some respect. He was somebody that was hovering around my top 50 last year, but he ultimately ended up going 62nd overall to Calgary. But I like him quite a bit. He's somebody that has really played well to start out this season with Kingston. In 19 games, has 14 goals, 14 assists for 28 points after being below a point per game last year. To me, with Battaglia, the strengths are pretty obvious with the smarts, with the way he uses his teammates, especially with how good he is in transition, how sneaky he can be. That's going to have to be used really well in the future because his skating is a little bit lackluster. The acceleration is a bit of a problem sometimes, but I think considering how smart he can be around the ice, I have hope that he could be a solid bottom 6er. Next up, we go on to the Carolina Hurricanes, who also have a ton of options to go for, but I gotta go for my boy Vladimir Grudinin, who was a 5th round pick by the Canes back in 2022. Obviously, as a D, is not that big at 5'10", 157 pounds right now, but he was somebody that has had a topsy-turvy road since he was drafted last year, was all over the place, but this season is playing pretty well in the KHL. In 18 games so far, as a goal, 4 assists, 5 points, is playing a lot more minutes and looking a lot more sound, and that's what I wanted to see out of him, because the puck handling ability, the edge work that he has is some of the best you'll see out of Russia, especially the edge work, which is just flawless. His mobility is incredible, and that's what you want to see out of a smaller defenseman. But the way he can read the ice, how much more he's been able to be confident in his own moves and his own offensive skill set, I think is going to be a really big thing for him going forward. And I think this is somebody that could be underrated for a while in this Kane system. Next up, we're going to go on to the Chicago Blackhawks, who also have quite a few options in their own right, but I wanted to go for Ethan Del Mastro. I think has continually been in this spot in Chicago's case. He's a 21-year-old D, 6'4", 209 pounds, and as a former 4th rounder, is looking like a steal at that position for Chicago. You can see last year in his first full AHL season, put up some absolutely monstrous numbers. This year, it's not quite matching that, but I think the defensive play has also taken some leaps and bounds. In Del Mastro's case, I think he's going to be most likely settled into this 4th, 5th role, where he's mostly a defensive defenseman who can use his physicality, especially on playing against the rush, to really stifle opponents. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing for him going forward. Considering the solid skating ability, the way he reads the ice, I think Del Mastro is going to be just this perfect, under-the-radar defenseman that is just effective in the minutes he plays. Next up, we go on to the Colorado Avalanche, and this is the hidden gem of all hidden gems right here. Next up, let's go on to Nikita Prischapov, who is somebody that was a 7th-round pick last season, but was one of the few players this year to actually play NHL games. Of course, with all the injuries the Avs had, he ultimately played 5 games for them, and so far, his start to the AHL hasn't been too bad either. With Colorado, 4 points in 6 games after being just above a point per game in the QMJHL last year. A pretty big overager pick by the Avs. So it was surprising that he was even drafted in the first place, but going back and watching him, I could see why. I mean, he's a really good forechecker, has great physical traits already, uses his body so well to protect the puck, especially around the boards and in the net front presence. There is a pretty big lack of skill there, I would say, but in Prischapov's case, with the way he plays, I don't think it can matter that much. I could easily see him being a 4th liner someday, and a solidified one at that. Sure, he might not be the flashiest player on this list, but in terms of actual underrated guys, I mean, nobody's talking about him. Now going on to another prospect who could be pretty under the radar, but could end up eating a lot of minutes in the NHL. Let's go on to the Blue Jackets and Luke Ashton, who was a 6th-round pick for them last year. Admittedly, I didn't watch much of him at all last season, but seeing what he's been able to do for Minnesota State this year, he's actually been pretty strong. You can see the size is the big thing. He is a tank, 6'6", 238 pounds, but to start out this NCAA career has been quite solid. In 12 games, he has 2 goals, 3 assists for 5 points. I don't think you're going to be getting much offense out of this guy, but considering the mobility and how good he is able to use his reach, how good of a physical presence he is, and just how quietly solid he is defensively, I could easily see him being a 7'6" defenseman someday and being a player that coaches love to have. Next up, we're going to go on to quite a bit of a different defenseman, but I still think an equally, maybe if not more effective player. Let's go on to my favorite team of the Dallas Stars, and I still have to go for Horan Menethil, who I think just continues to be the Stars' most underrated player. He was a 4th rounder back in 2023 NHL draft. Obviously not a big guy, but I think considering the smarts and considering how he uses his body, he's going to be an effective 2-way defenseman. So far with BC, he has been a solid guy for them. Last year in his rookie year, just a really under-the-radar defensive presence, and then this year, a little bit more offense so far, 4 points in 8 games, but I think the smarts and the way he uses his body, the presence that he has, and just the situational play that he provides, it's just somebody that is going to be quiet and effective and sturdy and has some good puck-moving moments too, which I think could be a little bit of a surprise. Next up, we're going to go on to the Detroit Red Wings, and a super fun one here because I will always take any chance I have to say Amadeus Lombardi. I think everybody should say that once a day because it is the best name of all time. Seriously though, as a 4th rounder back in 2022, Amadeus Lombardi has just been leaps and bounds improving since then. You can see in the OHL right after he got 102 points in 67 games and hasn't really looked back. He's been really solid under AHLer too, and this year in 12 games is 5 goals, 3 assists for 8 points. He's somebody that I think is just so speedy, so gifted with the puck, and it's just so much fun to watch out there. I'm not sure what type of NHLer he'll be, especially at the center position. I don't know if he'll be that for Detroit, but this guy is just so much fun to watch, and I do hope that Detroit is able to make him work. Though, considering some of the developmental issues there with even players like Bergeron, we'll have to wait and see on that. Now going on to a much different forward than Amadeus Lombardi, let's go on to the Edmonton Oilers' most underrated prospect, and the guy I don't see being talked really at all, and that's Shane Lachance of Boston University. He was a 6th-round pick by the Oilers back in 2021, but we've seen some pretty big improvement in his play since then. He's a 6'5", 218-pound left winger, big boy there, obviously. But what he's been able to do with Boston University so far has been pretty solid, and this year, a point per game, 9 points in 9 games, being the captain for them as well, after being the captain for the Youngstown Phantoms. He's somebody that I think is really strong with his physical traits and how he's able to drive the net with his shooting ability. That's something that I think is going to be the big thing for him going forward, the way he uses his body and the goal scoring ability in front of the nets and how he positions himself around that. That to me is the biggest thing. The skating is a little bit clunky sometimes, even if it has improved a little bit in the NCAA this year, but the chance is somebody that could be a solid maybe bottom 6 power forward, guy that could be on the power play as well and could knock in some goals. Not quite on the same level as Zach Hyman, but up that same alley. Next, I'm going to the Minnesota Wild, who have a physical specimen on their hands as well in Riga Lorenz, somebody that with Denver has just been a transformative player, 6'2", 194 pounds. His biggest trait is the physical tools and how he is able to overwhelm defensemen or anybody on the ice. He is just a beast out there, especially in the net front on the power play. He is somebody that is just going to be bang and crash, simple hockey, but you can see the success that he's had with Denver these last couple of seasons, how much of a beast he has become for them. The point production I think is a little low considering how he's been playing. He's still been playing very solid thus far, but he's somebody to watch as a really interesting bottom 6 power play option for Minnesota going forward. Now we go forward to the Montreal Canadiens and their most underrated prospect, and this is actually going to come from the goaltending side. We of course have hyped up Jacob Fowler a lot on this channel, but I think that's kind of made Evgeny Volokhin a little bit underrated in the Habs pool. He to me is right behind him in terms of goaltending impact to the next level. You can see at 19, 6'3", 168 pounds. He was just a 5th-round pick by the Habs in 2023, which I thought was a little bit low for him. And so far this year, he's done some pretty good things. He's only played a couple of KHL games, but in the MHL, he has really played still solidly up to this point. He's somebody that I think will transition onto the KHL pretty effortlessly once he's in that full-time role. But in Volokhin's case, I think he could easily be an NHLer right behind Fowler. Now we go on to the Nashville Predators, who have a lot of underrated prospects in their own pool, but somebody that I just think is not getting really any attention whatsoever is Aiden Fink, who was a 7th rounder back in 2023, but throughout this NCAA campaign, these last couple of seasons, has done nothing but succeed. You can see with Penn State, 34 points, point per game in his freshman year, and then this year he's improving upon that. In 7 games, is 2 goals, 7 assists, 9 points. The energy with Fink is to be the biggest thing. The way he's able to just attack the ice and just go out there and just play so resiliently. He's something that obviously is a little bit smaller, and I think adding some more muscle over the next couple of years will be really important for him, but I love the energy, I love the goal scoring knack that he has, and just the way that he's able to just perceive the ice and what needs to happen to create offense. Fink is just a simple and effective and energy player that I think Nashville's gonna love. Now I guess I skipped over Florida and LA for some reason, so next up let's go on to those two. For Florida, this was an easy decision. It's Jack Devine. It's unbelievable the Panthers got this guy in the 7th round and back in 2022 because he has just been unbelievable for Denver. You can see 56 points last year, and this season 16 assists, 17 points in 10 games, and trust me, he should have a lot more goals considering the way this guy plays. He is just a beast in so many ways. We talked about in Fink's case the way he attacks the ice. Devine is a monster. He will go after every puck, every loose chance, and with so much physicality, so much intensity, and this guy will just make your life so hard as a defenseman. And I think as a forechecker, as somebody that can establish play, especially with his passing ability and how far that's come, Devine is just somebody that I'm so excited about. And I could see a situation where he's a top 6er at the NHL level. I think he could be that good. Next up, let's go on to the Kings' most underrated prospect. And I'm going to go on the goaltending side again here with Hampton Slakinski, who I think is easily one of the more underrated ones out there goalie-wise. He was a 4th rounder by the Kings in 2023. He's somebody, though, that has just put up results since then. In the USHL last year was by far the best goalie. You can see the record, 28-3-0, unbelievable, but a 923 save percentage in the regular season and a 931 save percentage in the playoffs. And then you can see what he's been able to do so far with Western Michigan. He hasn't played too much, but in the 3 games he has played, a 938 save percentage, which for a freshman goaltender, not even 20 years old, you'll take that. Now let's go on to the New Jersey Devils and their most underrated prospect. This was an easy one for me because it'll always be Arseny Gritsuk. I mean, I've of course watched a lot of Ivan Demidov, watching SKA this year, but Arseny Gritsuk is just such a fun player to watch with the transition ability he has, the intensity, the speed, and the work ethic there. Gritsuk, I could easily see being an effective middle sixer who you just love to have in all situations. And I think for New Jersey, that type of depth is going to be great for them. You can see the KHL production year after year, just constant success with SKA. He's somebody that I think that New Jersey is really going to love to have in their system, and hopefully we'll be signing here pretty soon. Next up, let's go on to the Islanders' most underrated prospect. Offensively, Quinn Finley is up there for me. He's somebody that is just so impressive this season for the Badgers. You guys know I'm here in Wisconsin. I'm watching every single game, and that'll be a video later on in the year where we go over every single game of Logan Hensler, so watch out for that. But Finley has been the dynamic player for Wisconsin this year. They've lost a lot over the last year in terms of offense, players like Carson Bantle, Cruz Lucius, and you name it. I mean, there's so many guys throughout the list. But this year, he's been brilliant. In 10 games, he has 7 goals, 3 assists, 10 points. He has taken on the burden as the point producer and has been up to that level. And he has just been unbelievable, especially in one-on-one situations, on the power play, especially up the rush. He is somebody that could just be so dangerous with the puck. And I think for the Islanders, that's exactly the type of prospects they need right now. Now we go on to the New York Rangers' most underrated prospect and another NCAA guy here on the wing in Brody Lamb, who has really been developing well in the University of Minnesota program over these last couple of years. Was a 4th round pick back in 2021, but at 6'1", 165 pounds, this is somebody that I think will be a really effective point producer for the Rangers someday. You can see over a point per game this year in the NCAA, 6 goals, 5 assists, 11 points. He's somebody that I think will be a great power play, opportunistic scorer. Is somebody that, especially with his size, isn't huge, but knows how to use it very well, especially along the boards, and is somebody that draws attention extraordinarily well. And I think especially on the man advantage, that's going to be a really valuable thing for the Rangers going forward. Now on to the Ottawa Senators. Their most underrated prospect to me is Blake Montgomery, who we saw to go from a switch in the USHL and now is on to the London Knights, which is a pretty good system to go to, I must say. But he was a 4th rounder last year and was my favorite pick by the Senators last season. He was at 6'4", 196 pounds, obviously, but he's somebody that I think in the USHL is extremely raw, but has so much to work off of with how good of a physical presence he can be, with how underrated I think his shooting ability and his offense is. He's somebody that I think is going to be a raw project for sure, but I would not be surprised is an NHLer, a bottom 6 guy who just does so many good and little things right. Now on to the Philadelphia Flyers. To me, easily the choice is Igor Zaravkin, who as a 3rd rounder is putting up some of the best numbers we've seen out of any prospect out there goalie wise. This year in the KHL of SKA, he has 11 games, 2.53 goals against average, a 915 save percentage, and that's after Sochi having a 941 save percentage in 6 games. Zaravkin at 19 already, folks. He's looking like the real deal for the Flyers' future. Next up for the Pittsburgh Penguins, they don't have a lot of guys that I would say are really all that good in the first place, but Mikhail Ilyin is, to me, the best example of the Penguins drafting over the last couple of seasons. As a 5th rounder back in 2023, he has done great things since then in the KHL, just being a pretty consistent producer with his smarts and the speed and the passing ability especially. Those are things going forward that I think will be important for the Penguins to maximize. Next up on the Seattle Kraken, who I think have a team of underrated prospects, honestly, but Clark Caswell, to me, is one of my favorites out there. He was a 5th rounder by the Kraken in 2024, but he's just such a sneaky player. You can see the production also that he's been able to have the last couple of seasons for Swift Current, just consistently great. And this year, 26 points in 15 games. He's just such a sneaky player, though, in creating turnovers and establishing pressure, and the passing ability will be a big strength going forward. He's a premier playmaker, and I really don't see him getting talked about enough in that category. Next up on to the San Jose Sharks, and somebody that has really improved over the last couple of seasons, and that is Nate Miskey of the Victoria Royals. He's somebody that is a 5th round pick, could end up being a steal here. 6'4", 212 pounds, and the way he plays physically is, of course, a big strength for him, how violent he can be. But the offense has taken some pretty big leaps over the last couple of these seasons, and this year, he's a point per game so far with Victoria, 14 points in 14 games. The aggressiveness and how much he's been able to more efficiently use his body offensively and use his confidence. Miskey is somebody that I think is going to be pretty underrated here. Now on to St. Louis, and Adam Jecko is one that I will always always talk about in terms of raw potential. 6'5", 201 pounds, and a third-round pick back in this last draft. He's something that I think in the WHL is still in his learning phase, but you can see this year of Edmonton in 15 games, he has 12 assists, 17 points, is really starting to figure things out in North America, which is great to see. But considering the size he has, the raw talent, especially with the puck that he's able to have, this is somebody that is just a world of potential. We'll see how that translates onto the NHL. Now on to the Tampa Bay Lightning, and one that I don't see a lot of people talking about at all, but has been a force for Minnesota recently, and that is Connor Kurth, who I think is a really underrated one for Tampa. In the 6th round back in 2022, he's really developed his game offensively. You can see this year in 10 games, he has 7 goals, 7 assists for 14 points. He's just kind of a Swiss Army knife and plays so slippery. He's somebody that can just evade defenders so well, establish pressure, and once his team is in the zone, be able to be such a good cycler, be able to be such an efficient player. And he's somebody that I don't think is going to be a revolutionary skilled player for Tampa Bay, but is another one up this alley for Tampa that they've drafted recently that's just smart, is quick with their decision making, and is just mature with the way they play. And they've been able to have a few NHLers already with that mindset. Next up, let's go on to the Toronto Maple Leafs, who I think have one big underrated prospect, and that is Miroslav Hlinka, who was a 5th round pick by the Leafs last year. I really liked his defensive ability and what we were able to see out of that, but I wanted to see him become more of an aggressive player, really assert himself with, I thought, some pretty good stick handling ability, and the way he was able to use it, he was somebody that I think had potential there. And so far in his first WHL season, we've seen that. In 15 games with Edmonton, he has 10 goals, 8 assists, 18 points, and that's pretty successful to see out of a guy that's coming into North America for the first time. I think for Hlinka, he'll most likely be more of a defensive player, but what we've seen out of his offense gives me hope that we can see more of that in the future. Next up, let's move on to the Utah Hockey Club, and maybe the most underrated prospect on the list. He's somebody that I didn't really have much of a radar on coming into the video, but I just had to do and watch more of him just because he deserved it. I mean, let's talk about Vadim Moroz of the Utah Hockey Club here, who was a 3rd round pick back in 2023, and is somebody that has just been great in the KHL since then. Last year, he got 22 points in 63 games, and then this year is over a half a point per game, 12 points, 7 goals in 23 games. Going back and watching him, it's actually pretty easy to see why he's so underrated. There's not a lot of flash to his game, and his puck handling and ability is just not really up to a great standard. But what this guy does is he just brings so much intensity, so much drive, and with the smarts that he has, is just such an effective, versatile player. And considering the size too, and how effectively he uses his body, I could easily see Moroz being this simple player that doesn't get a lot of attention because he doesn't have a lot of highlights, but just becomes a 4th, 3rd line player due to the simplicity in his game, how he's able to turn play in the right direction, and ultimately be an effective player, especially when the game gets tough. And in his case, I think a team like Utah that loves the size, loves those simplicity, especially in the last couple of the drafts, I think Moroz is somebody that could be really effective for them. Now on to the Vancouver Canucks, and I think I'm going to go on the defense here and go for Kirill Kudryavtsev, who is always kind of on that underrated tier for me. He was a 7th rounder back in 2022, and I've liked him really ever since then. He has put up some good numbers with the Sioux Greyhounds, and this year in his first full stint in the AHL, I think he's doing quite solidly. In 11 games, he has 4 points, and I think he's transitioning okay into the AHL, which for a 20-year-old is just fine. But considering the skill and the smarts that he has, I think that Kirill could be a really under-the-radar player for this Canucks defense. I don't think he's going to overwhelm players, and I think considering his size, that's maybe the biggest thing that holds him back, considering I think he's more of a defensive defenseman at the next level, but he's an interesting project, and considering the smarts, there's always something to build off there. Now on to the Vegas Golden Knights, who have another underrated one for themselves here. We go on to Tomas Urnen, who is somebody that has kind of been all over the place since he was drafted in the 6th round back in 2023. He was somebody that last year wasn't really playing too much with Ottawa, but got 6 points in 11 games, and then this year we've seen him really turn a page in his first full season in the OHL. You can see with Kingston in 19 games, he has 9 goals, 70 assists for 26 points. I think of Urnen, the biggest strengths are the anticipation that he has, the way he's able to survey the ice and know the right decision to make and the way to position himself well, especially in transition and offensively. He's just a super smart player, and I think that is a gift for him going forward. And I think considering the skill that he's been improving on year after year and the sneakiness at which he has that, he could really surprised quite a few defensemen out there, and I think that's been the case so far this year with Kingston. Now we go into the Washington Capitals and go on to another goaltending prospect on this list. I love my goalies, as you could tell, but I'm going to go with Nicolas Kemp, who I think is just the underrated guy for the Cap system. Was solid in the NCP last year, especially in the World Juniors at the U18 level, where for the US he got a 919 save percentage in 6 games, was a big part of that team. And this year he's having his freshman season with Notre Dame, and in 3 games he has a 239 goals against average, a 927 save percentage, and has looked pretty great there too. I liked him as a 4th round pick, and considering his pretty effortless transition onto the NCAA, there's a good future there. And now on to our last underrated prospect on the list. Let's go on to the Winnipeg Jets, and I don't think I could choose anybody else besides the man, the myth, the legend, Kevin He, who as a 4th round pick is looking just magical for the Jets since then. I mean, he was somebody that had to deal with a lot last year in Niagara. That's a bad franchise, a bad team right now, but he had to lead it in a lot of different ways. Now he's the captain, and you can see the play that he's been able to provide. In 18 games, he has 16 goals, 12 assists, 28 points. Him and Andrei Loshko of the Seattle Kraken are doing really well there now, and that's great to see. I mean, he was kind of a man on his own and on an island there in Niagara, and now you're starting to see the play that he's been able to provide. It's been pretty great, and I love to see that, especially as a Chinese-born player. He's on track to make the NHL, and I would love to see that. But that'll be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, hit that subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and comment down below your thoughts on my list and what you agree, what you disagree with. Hopefully, and this is the plan going forward at least, I'm going to be a lot more active in the comment section, so look out for that. But of course, should be with all the hockey fans you guys know online as well, to get the underrated prospects out to them, and click on this card for all of my hockey prospect talk in one playlist. So much to go right there to binge watch on your own time. And of course, shout out to BetUS for sponsoring today's video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a great hockey day, and goodbye.